Welcome to Yoga for You, a channel tailored to helping you discover your very own unique yoga practice.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Sagacity Spotlight. Today's guest is Amanda. In this talk we're going to go over what it's like to be a kinesiology major yogi. We're going to talk about teaching yoga in gyms. We're going to talk about the power of Shavasana and the importance of acceptance. I'm glad you're here. Hope you enjoy it. Stick around to the end and make sure you check the description section below for some juicy information. Hello everybody, welcome back. My name's Ty and today we have a lovely guest, Amanda. You may recognize her from the channel. She's been an absolute gem to work with, and therefore she has been my number one yogi I've worked with over the last couple of years as we've created this system. She has amazing teachings, amazing experiences in life, amazing lessons, wisdom. She's just amazing in general. So it's an honor to have her here and be chatting with her. But good morning, Amanda. How are you doing today?
Good morning. I'm so happy to be here, especially talking with such a good friend. And that was like the nicest introduction I've ever gotten.
Oh, it's just truth. It's just truth. And we know that to be. So, yeah, how's it going in Running Springs, California this morning?
Yeah, like I was telling you, it's been snowing for the last couple days. And I kind of was in a mode where I felt like it was spring. So I'm a little like thrown off that suddenly I have like 2 feet of snow in my yard, you know, but I guess winter is clearly not over. So
yeah, not quite,
no.
but we roll with it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As in life. So wanted to open it up today and just kind of begin with a simple general question, and that's, what does yoga mean to you?
Ooh, okay. It's like, it sounds so simple, but it's so big.
It is.
Oh, this has changed and I think will continue to change over time. And I've been practicing for about 8 years now, I believe, consistently. So I will address the question like right now. What it means to me is learning. It's more of like a learning to love myself in that. Like yoga means union in the general sense, and I feel like the union that's happening with me in yoga is learning how to love myself, and therefore learning how to love others in that way. But if we don't love every aspect of ourselves, not just the easy parts, like when I'm happy or I feel good, like right now I feel really good, but like, you know, yesterday I didn't feel super good. So how can I learn to love myself even on those days, and bring that all together, and then take that practice and distribute it outward. So it really is a practice that starts inward and then ripples outward, and then understanding the constant change and flow of that.
Yeah, I hear that. It's important to recognize that it starts inward. So many people can start this journey, you know, in a gym, which is, I mean, I'm not putting it down, but in a gym setting, it's a little bit more competitive, outwardly based, have found.
Yeah.
And working to pull that inward more, and it can be competitive in a outwardly in a studio as well. So there's no limitations
Yeah.
in that. But how have you found your practice to develop over the years? So, and then, for instance, when has it been hard to develop that inward based practice as you've been getting into yoga?
You know, maybe the process has felt hard, but I believe that even when you may, like what we might consider, we'll just put the gym on blast, what we might consider as like the most superficial version of practicing yoga. Let's just say it's in a gym and it feels much more physical, and maybe you actually showed up because you wanted to lose weight or you wanted to get flexible, or some aspect of that brought you there, which is actually wonderful. You cannot avoid it. Even in that presence, it will work its way inside and then go out. And I think that's why I stayed with yoga, because actually my first yoga class ever was at LA Fitness Gym. which years later turned out to be the first place I ever taught, was in that very same room, which I thought was really interesting.
Wow.
So even though I didn't recognize it at first, when I look back in my first few times practicing, and no matter where I was, it was very much like an inward process that showed up outward, you know, whether how my body changed, or how I reacted to myself, or how I treated people. So
Yeah, that's important to distinct. It's also important to just, reiterate the fact that it doesn't matter what gets you on the mat, right? Like, let's get all that hierarchical understanding away and just say that whatever gets you on the mat is a blessing, whether that's a friend, a parent, a dog, like whatever, like it doesn't matter. So it's good to recognize that it will pull you in. Like you said, you can't avoid it. I love that. So how have you found your practice has changed over the years? I know, just because I know some background about you, Amanda's been a long time soccer player. So how did you notice the shift going from the athletic side of soccer into the more flexible side of yoga? How did that transition happen for you, and when in your life?
yeah, so part of the reason I started doing yoga was because I got pretty badly injured, like towards the end, playing competitively when I was about 18. And in that time, the health and fitness world, especially with younger athletes, they really weren't focusing on stretching or mobility as much as they were focusing on strength and power and endurance, which are all, that's a very important aspect, but you'll see a lot, especially women, they get a lot of injuries in the knees because mine just happened to be in my hip flexor. And so when I started yoga, I was really stiff and very stiff, like physically I couldn't touch my toes. It was really, really hard. But what also drew me to yoga, really, because there is a lot of power moves. It does take a lot of core strength. There's a lot of arm balances. So I'm actually really grateful, because if yoga was just stretching, I don't think I would have stayed, because I enjoy the like power and like activating aspect of movement. And I teach that way too. But then I just had to learn how to balance that with the other side. And it took me many years. Some people get emotional when they do the power stuff. When I first was starting doing yin yoga, was like, this was like a tears of like, it was like a floodgate. It would just like come out of me. It was honestly some of the hardest classes I've ever done. But it turns out now I think they're one of my favorite things to teach, because it touches a place of vulnerability that I hadn't accessed and maybe I was avoiding for a really long time. So I think all my years of soccer show up in my practice and how I teach, and especially the team aspect of playing soccer. Like you cannot win a game or be successful in a game, even if you don't win, if you do not work with the other 10 players on the field and all the girls on the bench. You have to work together. And I think that shows up in our practice too on the mat. If you make your practice so individual that you don't recognize that you're being affected by everyone's energy in the room, and your energy is affecting other people, then you're missing out on something that can be really, really powerful. So I think there was definitely like a big difference between the two, but they also continue to like marry over time. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's always interesting to observe how two things we love a lot can have similarities, and how they even change over time. So you said that initially you would find yourself super emotional during yin. Has that been the case even still to today? Do you find yourself emotional in yin, or do you find yourself more emotional through the power stuff?
I think, as we talked about this, now it has changed, which I find really interesting. I think the pendulum swung and I was really into the flexibility side. I'm still not the most flexible person in the world, but now when I do like anything in the core specifically, and our teacher taught us a lot about this, that a lot of time we'll focus our strength on our shoulders and in our neck. and it's a safe place to be here. You're like always here. But if you can relax here, and yeah, the strength can come here, but it's like more of a gut thing. When I started to make that shift and rely more on my gut, that I think has been the hardest part for me. That's been really, really difficult and challenging. But yeah, I don't think vulnerability has any limits. There's just so many layers of it.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's once you feel like you kind of got it mastered, some shakes it up, and then it's like, oh God, another one,
Yeah,
really?
so
So
true.
it is interesting, speaking about, I'll go ahead and say his name's Scott, because he'll eventually be on one of these podcasts as well, but a fantastic teacher who brings the awareness into the core system, into the guts, as he would say. And did you notice a shift in your practice when you began to bring that focus down into your guts personally?
Yeah, there's a lightness uh, that comes from when you start to move from your guts. Like if I feel like when I stay here, I feel really heavy, like emotionally, mentally, physically. But when I started to learn to move from my guts, and on the days where it was clicking really, really well, it felt light, like my feet could just come forward much easier. I felt less tense. It moves into a space of effortlessness, but of course you cannot do those things without some effort. But it's kind of a hard thing to explain. Like we can try and explain it with words, but it's really just a feeling, that suddenly you're kind of like gliding through your practice in like this vast presence.
Yeah, it is really difficult, but I know that still won't stop us from trying to describe it. If I had to speak on it, because I do have that experience too, to some degree, it's almost like mindfulness, right? Like we're mindfully not pushing, we're mindfully harnessing the strength and the power in our guts. And it's like, we're not really forcing the practice to be there, but that mindfulness around how we engage our core through the flow allows us to be more structured, I guess. I don't know. Be more structured in how we move, and be more aligned, I guess. I don't know. Like when you do jump backs, or when you jump forward, or just your forward folds, being mindful about where you fold, for instance, will create a lot more comfort than if you just collapse in on the guts, right? And kind of mess up the actual stretch or what it's intended to be. Anyway, I have
Yeah,
found.
no, that's such a good point. I like when you said like talking about moving from the core in like just a physiological sense, like it's our center of balance, right? So when we go to jump back, or even just step back to a plank or into chaturanga, like if you're trying to, let's say again, move excuse me, from the shoulders, it distributes the weight in an uneven way. So when we learn to move at our core, at our guts, that distributes the weight better, I think, and then gives us the support throughout the whole body.
Yeah, I love that. And so you have some experience with kinesiology, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, I got my bachelor's in kinesiology, exercise science.
And that's pretty amazing. At what point in that process did you come into yoga? Was it before, after, or during?
It was during. I was working for an insurance company and going to school full time. And I was like, I had tried yoga, or I had found it on Instagram or done videos here and there, but I was just so miserable sitting at a desk all day. Um, and I wasn't playing soccer anymore, so there wasn't like this fun aspect of movement. And I was really tired. I think that's like key, is I was exhausted, but I had been sitting in a desk for 8 hours, which doesn't really make sense. So then, while I had switched majors because I was or environmental science first, and I was like, okay, I really like this. And then I had found yoga, and my mom had said, you should learn to teach this. And thank goodness for her, she literally found Scott. And then I was in a teacher training and was teaching by the time I was about 21. And yeah, so once that started happening, I quit my job and I taught yoga full time, and I taught so much, and I was much happier. It wasn't totally sustainable. I did it for a few years through college, but it paid the bills, um, and I had so much more energy, and I was really passionate about it. So, but it was nice to have both happening, because I was able to take what I was learning in school and like apply it to something in the yoga classroom, you know, wherever I was teaching. And because I had the background with being an athlete for so long, I've had a lot of injuries. I feel like it really is true that your students find you. And we're always like worried, like, oh, should I even teach? Like, there's so many teachers out there. It's so competitive. Like, I still like catch myself in that frame of mind. I'm kind of in there lately, actually. I'm not gonna lie. But you know, they really do find you, and then the ones that resonate with you will stay, and because you have something to offer that's helping them. And if they move on, they move on. That's good, you know. But yeah, I started to teach to a lot of students that were just in pain, mostly just chronic, because they sit a lot and they didn't know how to move. And the whole world of yoga was getting really commercialized, and in some ways not as open to everyone in some ways. And so it was nice to teach in gyms for so long, because you could reach the people that, you know, they weren't doing the splits, but like they were able to touch their toes again, and they weren't as tired. And after a long day, they could go home and sleep for real, not like a fake sleep, but a real sleep. So I feel like that was a long answer to your question, but that's like kind of where that whole process led me to teach.
Totally. It's perfect though. I mean, what would you say the biggest shift that you've seen happen in your students from when they come in and they're tight and they're not sleeping and they're struggling to, you know, just sit in a staff pose or just sit in a lotus posture, and then to they get to the point where they can touch their toes? What do you, in your experience, find clicks within them to get them to that point of enjoyment?
Confidence, confidence, self-love, like believing they're deserving of being able to feel good. Like, isn't that what anyone really wants to feel? Like, it's gonna make me emotional just like thinking about it, but it's so true that like when we feel so stiff in our bodies, it's also like something is going on like internally, like with the mind or emotions, or maybe even spiritually, that like being able, if you just only did the physical part of yoga, that is absolutely enough. If you just sat in a cross-legged position or sat in a chair and just focus on even just the sensations in your body, it would be enough. Because like this is the vessel that we have to like experience this life, and if we're not taking some time to take care of it, then we're doing ourselves a disservice. And when at the end of every class, you know, it's like, if I could at least make them feel better moving in their bodies, if they felt like they could just walk to their car feeling a little bit better, sitting a little bit taller, like that was enough, you know. And I think there's always that aspect that when you struggle together, you feel like more connected. And that's why group movement is so powerful, because we all sit with our stuff and we move and we do the best we can. So yeah, I really, honestly, I would equal it up to confidence, self-love, and like wanting or feeling deserving of it all.
Yeah, that's huge. Just feeling, you know, we know the mind plays such a huge role in, you know, telling yourself, oh, I got a 5 o'clock yoga class. It's 4:30. Do I really need to go? Do I really want to go? And knowing the entire time that by 6 o'clock, you'll be so grateful you went. That mind can always just kind of get in there and try to convince you otherwise, to not go or to do anything other than yoga at that time. So it's interesting for me in my teaching experience, to see what it is that brings people back, and at what point in their journey. And everyone's different, right? But eventually something clicks, and I would agree that a lot of it's confidence and them understanding, oh, that's how the pose is supposed to feel, not look, but feel. I feel that. And so encouraging them to play and explore in their body when they're in the pose. And that's what I think makes you such a unique teacher. We've have hours. I can't even tell you how many hours we've worked together just in the capturing of the yoga content, in our time doing that together. But I've noticed how not only do you modify very well, but you also encourage play. You also encourage, you discourage rigidity in the yoga practice. So you're not saying, okay, here's downward dog, hold, elbows in, triceps wrapped. You're not just giving instructions, but you also encourage people like, walk the dog, sway the hips, come down to your knees if you need to. Like, you're very good at that. And how have you developed that over the years? Is that just from being body aware or just from teaching a lot? Because you've taught a lot of classes doing this full time for a while, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I feel like I've had a lot of influences. Obviously, Scott is an Ashtanga teacher, so I had definitely like that. But I didn't get super into Ashtanga right away. I moved more towards vinyasa classes. And as I was going through that training, I went to as many as I could with different teachers so that I could kind of take what I liked and copy some of their cues and then develop that over time. One teacher that really resonates with me still is Megan Curry, and she's from Canada, but she currently lives in Bali. And the way she moves is extremely fluid, and it's not very fast, because you'll go to some vinyasa classes and they're fast. It's so fun. The music's pumping, you're doing all that. She moves a little bit slower, definitely moves from the guts. And so I feel like a lot of my teaching style has come from her. I also feel that when there's a place for being rigid, when we need to work on that alignment a little bit, I do believe in that, but at the same time, I feel like our world is so rigid right now that the aspect of play is like essential, because as adults, we forget how to play. And one of the things I did, because I would consider myself in some ways, like I lean more toward, it's more comfortable for me to be rigid. Like I can focus and be super organized, and been known to be like a personality. So to move out of that comfort zone, I went to Bali actually to do a acro yoga training. So it's called Acro Vinyasa with Claudine and Hansa. And it's very much a play, because you're working with partners and you're gonna fall, and like you feel like a kid again, airplane on your parents' feet. And so I did that, and I don't teach it a whole lot. I did a few workshops and I loved doing it, but I feel like it was more of like, how can I take this and bring it into my teaching and just a vinyasa style class or whatever kind of yoga I'm teaching on that day, because we just don't have enough of it. So I would say that's the inspiration of the idea of play. As far as like the movement of play, like how are we ever going to know what's good, not even good for our bodies, but what our bodies are asking us from us or telling us? They're giving us like subtle cues all the time. If we're not taking a moment to like feel what it's like to like just shift your hips a little, like almost do a little bit more extremes. Like if you're in down dog, can you flare your hips a lot for a moment and then like tuck it under a lot, and then find a balance between that seems to fit you well in that moment. Yeah, I feel that if we're constantly relying on a teacher to tell you what it is and this is how it should look like, and you already brought this up, like focusing on how the pose feels instead of how it looks is so helpful, because then we can adjust day by day. because one day that might work, but the next day it might not. And you have to be malleable enough to know the difference and when to make the changes, or when to set your knees down, or move a little bit more, or be more still. So yeah, I think it's a discipline and a play.
Yeah, and it's so much about forgiveness too, right? Like forgiving. Yoga for me has been a huge forgiveness practice, and for a lot of for my students, I do a lot of privates. They're a lot of the same way, you know, getting them on the mat to forgive their past, forgive their current, you know, forgive themselves. Yesterday I could do crow, now I can't even get up into crow, and that being that allowance, like, okay, it's fine, like we're allowed to have off days. So taking all that into consideration, what would you say one can expect when coming to take one of your classes, just in general?
Good question. So I would say to expect an emphasis on breath, very big emphasis on breath. And there'll be stillness, times of stillness, and there will be times of dynamic movement. And then there are times of this almost like free flow. And like I've given you what the sequence is, but there's this moment where suddenly they don't even look like individual poses. It's just like a gracefully moving in and out, and it becomes almost like a dance. And a general acceptance of whatever is to come, and then to allow ourselves to feel at the end, which is so important, because if we don't digest and process, it's going to be really hard to integrate what we did on the mat and take it off the mat or into whatever else we're going to do.
I love that. And so let's talk on that for a moment, because I think that's so incredibly important. A lot of people, teachers especially, I know, just kind of glaze over that. What do you mean by integrating at the end of a class, and how important is that? Can you give some explanation around that?
Yeah, definitely. So we like talking about transitions, like on the very like physical sense, when you, let's say, go from a warrior two to a side angle pose, okay? And the poses are not the only thing that are important. The transition is important too. And so we learn to like feel the transition, and it's almost its own part, and it sets us up for the next part, right? So if we're in a warrior two, then we're moving to side angle. That transition is going to set us up for a side angle. And I believe it's the same thing like when we move into Shavasana, and we're in Shavasana and we end class and we go on to the next thing. And this is just my opinion, but if we just like ended class and we were like, okay, stretch, okay, that was a hard class, thank you everyone, namaste, and then we left. Okay, like sometimes maybe that's what you have to do, but it's so important to allow our body to feel the stillness at the very end. And sometimes in my classes, like there'll be more than one stillness. Like we might do something really hard, and then we might be in child's pose for like 10 breaths before we do something else. And I might cue that, and I also might tell you, hey, take that whenever you need to. Because if you need a moment to just feel and process before you go into the next thing, like that can be really powerful. And maybe there's a part of me that knows that I've rushed through a lot of life thinking that the faster I go, the more I'll get done, or the more successful I'll be, or more whatever. And truth be told, like if we can't process what just happened, like did we really like get to feel it for what it is, and allow that, like we keep coming back to acceptance, right? So it's like an acceptance of that practice, allowing. There's probably a lot of sensations in the body, especially in Shavasana, and letting that stillness happen and letting them kind of all dissipate. And then there's usually, you know, maybe some kind of grounding effect. And then we can get up, you know, say our goodbyes, our thank yous to ourselves and everyone that's there, and then go on. And I feel like if we just jumped up and like went to the next, we'll be like, oh my God, what the hell happened in there? Like, you don't even know, because you're like, I just did this like really powerful class maybe, and you're like, wow, that was amazing, but like you almost feel flustered, like you get all this tension in your shoulders, and you're like, and like, I don't know, it's so hard to explain, but yeah, maybe you can help me. But do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I understand. And I understand very well what you're saying. And it is really hard to explain, but there's so much power in allowing the body to just settle in, right? We let go of that. Maybe we've been holding on to, I mean, for new people in yoga, for new beginner yogis, it is a lot of like, am I doing it right? Am I doing it right? Are my shoulders right? Are my everything, is it right? Is it right? Am I doing this? Like, there's so many questioning, right? One is letting go of that mind. Two is letting go of the tension. And three is, if there is a third one, which there's many more, but we'll just do three. It's letting go of the breath, right? Because then we're told while we're doing all these complex poses, like, okay, breathe. Okay, now move. And now shoulders down. Okay, now breathe. And it's like, wow, what am I, like, where am I supposed to be focusing? And then we get to the mat shavasana and we lay there. And for a brief moment, class depending, teacher depending, we get to focus on nothing. And sometimes that bores people. Sometimes people are fidgety and they just can't sit still, right? We've seen that in our classes. Sometimes people fall asleep. It's just like, there's such major different portions of it. But regardless, whatever your body needs in that moment is so important to just provide it with whatever it needs to heal and to settle into that acceptance of the class. And maybe you have some trippy visuals and you see colors, who knows? But you also may just see nothing. So like, you can't go into expecting anything at all.
Yeah, but key aspect, I feel like you just totally summed it up in your number 3, letting go. Like, if it is a letting go, because we're so used to like doing, oh, we have to do something to be important, or we have to do this to be better. And the end is, the laying there is just about being. It's just about being and understanding that you are perfect exactly how you are in this moment. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. And also, going back to the point that you made about people who, when we get bored, it goes back to that, because we're like, oh, this is boring, we should be doing something, you know, and that's just our mind's way of telling us that we're not enough. And that's not true. It's not, you know, and part of yoga is learning that we are enough as we are. There's no need to like even prove to yourself, and especially to others, you know. So yeah, if every so often we have to stop and let go and just be.
Yeah, wow. Letting go, just being, acceptance, beautiful themes we're seeing pop up in the talk so far today. It's such a surrender. And we talk about mindfulness, and mindfulness is just that, you know, if you're getting on a subway or standing in line at Subway, you know, I don't know, maybe you can find that sensational breath that's just like fills you up. And in that moment you can just, and then just breathe the day away. And you get right back to it, right? It's always going to be there. We know this. Like after every yoga class, your troubles, your worries, your chores, your tasks, your spouse, your family, your animals, well, they'll be there. But it's like, I always tell people, it's a beautiful thing about giving yourself this time to envelop into just you, that a little bit of selfishness that we allow ourselves, you know. And so it's interesting to see how it all plays out on the individual level, but these conversations help people at least begin to understand why, right? Why do we do Shavasana? Why is it good to let go? Why, you know, and these questions people may not even know they have, but hearing conversations like this can allow people to surrender a little bit deeper in that Shavasana next time. And that's really what it's all about, because they say Shavasana is the most important pose of the entire class. Well, some people will say that. And I would agree. And I think based off what you had to say so far today, I think you would too.
Yeah, I feel like all that we did prepared us for Shavasana, you know, um, because Shavasana might feel a lot different in the beginning. Sometimes I'll teach that. We'll start with Shavasana. Be like, how does Shavasana like feel right now? Like without judgment, like what is like, just kind of like keep a little memory of that for a moment. And then we go through class and with all that concentration and breath and body awareness and strength and flexibility, how does that change stillness for you? Sometimes, honestly, I have had Shavasanas where after a class, I feel even more agitated. So if someone listening to this is like, yeah, I don't feel peaceful in Shavasana at the end, that's okay. Like, I'm sure eventually you will, if you haven't already, but it's also pretty normal to feel agitated because sometimes through a practice, we like peel back a layer, something maybe that we had like kept hidden because it hurt our hearts too much. And so then when we get to that moment of stillness, it's like, it feels very revealing and really uncomfortable. And it's just so happens I'm doing right now like a little mini online workshop with Megan Curry because I'm so in love with her. And it's all about moving into discomfort, literally. And how we can notice like how we're in comfort. And that's not necessarily like comfort isn't bad. It's if we completely avoid discomfort. So when is the moment that we move into discomfort? And then also noticing the moment when we move back to comfort. And that those are both like, it's not like good or bad. We should move from back and forth between them. So just noticing when things are uncomfortable, and is the discomfort beneficial or is it not? And sometimes like there are moments in Shavasana where, or any pose, like this is when you maybe go into a child's pose, where it's like that discomfort isn't beneficial, it's not helping you grow. And so you lower the knees, you take a child's pose, or maybe you have to come out of Shavasana and sit up and have your eyes open. And that's perfectly okay because there is helpful discomfort where it's helping us grow and helping us learn something about ourselves. And then sometimes there's a space where it's not helpful and only we can decipher the two. And that's how we become our own teachers and our own advocates through life.
Yeah, discernment comes through paying attention, right? We can't discern anything if we're not listening.
Yeah.
So it's good to hear that you're working on that. Maybe some of the yogis listening can expect to maybe see some classes taught by you soon, influenced by those teachings by Megan Curry. Shout out to Megan Curry. Thank you for being so awesome.
Seriously. Maybe we'll send her this recording at the end, be like, here you go.
Yeah, and maybe one day she'll be on here. Who knows? That'd be a dream,
yes.
wouldn't it?
Yes.
So what
Can I be a co-host?
Yes, we can have a panel. How about that?
Okay.
So what do you see is next for you? What are you working towards right now in the yoga world? Are you introducing privates perhaps? What can people expect from you in the next coming months?
Okay, so I decided to take like a year off teaching, which it's basically almost been a year. And with COVID and all this stuff going on, it was actually a good time. I learned some really hard but helpful lessons last year. And so my goal for this year is to really take it upon myself to like move forward in my teaching and what I want to offer others. So likely, obviously, I've been working with JU, so Ty and I will be recording more videos, some with the voiceover, some maybe with more like detailed instruction where it's me giving instruction live on the video. I also do have my own website, so amandaboucheryoga.com. And I'm kind of in the process of revamping that right now. I'm going to have my friend Josh help me with it this weekend, but I'd like to have classes on there, even like discussion panels on there as well. So there's still like, I don't have like a set, like, oh, this is what's going to happen. Just currently working with JU, making those videos, and then coming back more with like an online presence, and then maybe some in-person classes like at a park once a week. So yeah, you'll see me slowly crawling out of my hole in the last couple months. So I'm really excited about that, and of course working more with you, Ty. So
Right on. Yeah, that's all sounds fun. It's good to hear that you're, you know, coming out of early retirement and you're gonna hit it again and, you know, ease into it in your own way. I know it's gonna be beautiful and wholesome and very much intentional. I don't think you can do a thing that's not highly intentional. So it's gonna be beautiful to see whatever comes from it. In our closing questions, I always like to just open it up for any seeker to get a glimpse into what has helped you the most. Any person who's seeking that knowledge, seeking that book, maybe seeking that documentary, seeking that little bit of taste of something. What would you recommend to people? Maybe something that's helped you through the process of discovering more about what practice is, or just life in general. It doesn't have to be yoga based.
oh, okay. So like a book or specifically, or just any kind of practice, or okay.
Anything.
Hmm. I would say giving yourself an hour in the morning before you have to address or talk to anyone, really, or take care of anyone. So ideally, I read this book called The 5 a.m. Club, and it's really made a huge difference in my life the last few months, especially as I was trying to process how I wanted to move forward after like a year of healing. So if you can, you know, trying to get up at 5 a.m. and from 5 to 6, like making that sacred. And, you know, it could hopefully maybe start with some movement just to get like the blood flowing, to a journaling practice. Journaling is extremely helpful to, you know, and then spending maybe the last 20 minutes or so learning something that really matters to you, that maybe has nothing to do with the work you actually do, but something that really like sits true to your heart and you want to learn more about. So yeah, and having that hour to yourself, like in solitude, to focus on the things, just to focus on you and see how you're feeling before you just jump out into the day, you know, before you have to take care of your kids or your animals or start working, you know, or feel like you have to put on a face if that's how you feel every day. So having that time, and I think a big aspect of that, like a little concentration of that, journaling has been really powerful, because in that journal, it's like a time for you to write whatever comes to mind, your dreams, your goals, your visions, to the things that have broke your heart, to the things that have healed you, to the random thoughts, like to the I don't know how I feel today. And try and do that for 5 to 10 minutes a day, and just like let that be a place where it's safe for you to say whatever you want to say, and allow you to process. So yeah, I think that would definitely be my little nugget of wisdom for the world.
I love it. That's very wholesome, and I love it because you don't just say what you recommend, but you kind of give, again, not leaning toward rigidity. Some people immediately like journaling. Okay, I read here that I have to do this. List out 10 things I'm grateful for, and that's like, sure. But I like how even in that reference or recommendation, you allowed space for the individual to discover what it is that they feel the need to write or to work on that day. So thank you for that. And is there anything that you'd like to feel called or would like to share with anybody who may be listening right now?
Yeah, I if you're afraid to start something, to do something, I get it. I totally understand, and I feel for you. So just remember that small steps go a long way. And even 5 minutes every day, or if you only have a minute, to give yourself time to write about it, to do something that'll make a difference. It's everything. And that's all we have to start with. So if it's yoga that you want to try, hopefully, you know, little bits at a time is more than enough. Yeah. And thank you, Ty, like so much for bringing me on here and having my voice be heard and facilitating all of this. You are a true friend.
Oh, thank you. And I could say the same about you. It's through these talks and through these videos that we can begin to really show the world that yoga is not a one size fits all. It's not. And the more we can encourage others to develop and discover what yoga means to them, the more we can see yoga pop up in the world more genuinely, right? Not trying to fit someone else's narrative of what yoga should look like. So thank you, as always, for being here and giving your heart to us all. And I'd like to encourage anybody to check out the plethora of videos we've recorded. Amanda, like I said, is one of my top recording artists, I can say. One of my top recording yoga teachers I have on the channel at this moment. So get in there. If you want to work into the spine, she has that. If you want to work into the breath work, there's that. Meditations, boom. Intermediate, boom. Touching your toes, boom. Like literally anything. Just dive in, give it some play, and see what happens. You have her website. It'll be listed below along with some of the book recommendations that she made. Feel free to reach out to her. She's a pure soul and she'll be happy to help you. And yeah, let's look forward towards many more of these beautiful discussions. And as always, many more videos. But thank you so much for your time, Amanda. So much love for you.
Thank you. Same.
Hey everybody, really hope you enjoyed that talk. It was beautiful to have that experience with that shared guest. We have a lot of very useful information in the description section below, so be sure to check it out. I've also linked any and all videos with that individual in the description below, so check those out as well. It's an honor to bring this footage to you, and I hope you can come back and continue to deepen your practice. Namaste.